Welcome to Coaching Uncaged by Animas, the podcast that explores the art, science, and career of coaching. And now, introducing your host and interviewer, Yannick Jacob.
There we go. Pascale Brady, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited. A little nervous, but very happy to be here. Thank you for the honor.
Oh, thank you for making time. It's always I'm always in awe of the generosity that so many coaches and thought leaders bring into this. We had a little bit of a chat and already a wonderful human moment. We'll spare the details. Maybe someday we do a behind the scenes special. But Pascale, you're the challenge coach, which personally I appreciate because a lot of coaching is about challenges. And the way that you describe coaching is quite beautiful because people want to go somewhere, and then along the way there's obstacles and challenges, and that's sounds broad, but it's actually digs deep into psychology, and particularly the theoretical perspective that you're coming from, because you're an Adlerian coach. You're a certified Adlerian coach. You're out there as an Adlerian coach, and you have chosen Adlerian psychology and principles and as the foundation for how you work with people.
That's
So
correct.
You've come with 30 years of experience in professional industries. You've been coaching for nearly 20. So you're close to the ICF, I know that. There's a lot that I don't know, and I'm really curious to explore that with you. And particularly dig into how you've been using Adlerian psychology in education, in your work with parents, and also in your coaching, both in life coaching and in organizations. So I wonder if there's something else that might be helpful for people to know about you as they're tuning into this.
Well, I can start telling you how I came to Adler and to coaching, because I actually came to coaching through Adler. You think that would be of interest? Should I tell that story?
So Adler came first. That makes sense chronologically.
Right, exactly.
What was the pull?
So I had children 25 years ago, my first child, and I was by myself. I'm from France, and I was by myself in the US with, in a new area, knowing absolutely nobody. And I was an old mom. I was 34 when I had my first kid. And I thought I had wanted a kid for 25 years. I was going to be an awesome mother. And then this first child comes around, and she's absolutely not who I had expected and projected and assumed I would have, etc. And also, I wasn't either. I was just a horrible mother. I had no idea how to deal with her. It was really difficult. And my French friends, because I'm from France, told me, oh, we're in Maryland. There's this parenting school that is absolutely amazing around the corner. It's based in positive discipline, and we don't have anything like that in France. And you should absolutely go there. You better believe I was signed up and started the next week, and it's been 24 years and I've never left. So I'm still there teaching classes,
Wow.
coaching parents, etc. Because after taking the classes, there were only 3 classes. It's called the Parent Encouragement Program. It's based in Adlerian Psychology. And there's PEP 1, PEP 2, and PEP 3. And I took them once, I took them twice. I had another kid, I took them again and again. And my husband finally says, listen, how many times do you need to take these classes? And so I'm like, whoops, I better start teaching this stuff so I can do it for free. And so that's how I became a certified parent educator in those Adlerian parenting classes. That's how I met Adler. And then PEP also had a bunch of additional courses on Adlerian psychology. And I literally fell head over heels in love with Adler for a number of reasons that we can delve into in a bit. But I just couldn't get enough, and I was swallowing it down. And so then I started training. Then I had a second child. I didn't want to go back to international sales and marketing, which is what I was doing before. It was a blast, don't take me wrong, but I was in planes all the time. I was all over the world all the time. And that was not the parenting I had in mind. I really wanted to be close to my kids and actually raise them. And so I thought about, well, what should I do next? And so I said, I know what I'm going to do with Adler now. I'm going to become an Adlerian psychologist. My husband said, are you kidding? 4 years back to school, plus the 3 years of licensing, plus, out of the question. This isn't happening. We have 2 babies, right? So then a friend of mine said, well, there's this new thing that's just out that's called coaching. And it's a much shorter, training, a much shorter certification. If you even want one, you don't really need one. And so you could do that instead. And that's how I decided to start a coaching business 18 years ago. And I became a certified coach. I actually went to the Coactive Institute, CTI, of coaching. And that's where I learned my coaching craft per se. But then I also started going to Adlerian conferences and Adlerian summer schools pretty much every year on a very regular basis. And I can tell you more about those two in a while if we want to talk about that. And that's how I'm not a certified Adlerian coach, because that actually does not exist on the market. There is no such thing as Adlerian coach training per se. But I'm a certified coach, and then I'm extensively trained in Adlerian psychology. But because I'm a coach, I can't become an Adlerian psychologist because that's not something that's offered. So that's the path that got me here.
Yeah. Thank you for laying that out. And it really strikes me once you get into the kind of psychology approaches that are deeply grounded in often derivatives of Freudian psychology, or somehow found their origin there. It seems that practitioners form that there often isn't a clear path towards how do you become a certified ex-coach, but it's like, well, you have some foundational coach training, and then you start going to conferences and you're reading and you get supervision and you're doing a CPD here and you're looking into different ways of how psychology can inform how you practice.
Right.
And
And I also think that a lot of coaches actually come to coaching through a specialty that they have, that they really care about a great deal, very often because it's something that touches them, right? We do the work we need to do. And so you might have an ADHD person, a specialist, or somebody who has ADHD that decides, I'm going to become an ADHD coach, and then they go get the ADHD coach training, So sometimes it's a psychological orientation. My experience in the United States with all the coaches we have there and all the coaching schools we have is that, I don't know, I don't have any statistics on that, so maybe I'm wrong on this, but I think that a lot of coaches actually come to a specialty through a coaching school from their own background, and less from a psychological background. I think that, and maybe that's more a European thing. Maybe, I don't know.
Yeah, but it sounds like that parenting course wasn't the kind of course where you're being taught knowledge, but if you can do something a handful of times and keep doing it, it seems like it brought up more question than it put answers on the table.
Yes and no. Those particular classes at Peppery we teach are really both theoretical but also practical. So in other words, we have people experience something. So I can give you an example because we heard that you have a child at home. So we have one parent standing on a chair. It's a little dangerous. And we have another parent sitting on the floor, and the parent standing on the chair kind of like scolds the child on the floor with a finger and says, why did you do this, and don't do this again? And we help parents feel that size difference, in other words, that power difference that is created because between a very small child. And then we explain to them, about equality and how equality is important and putting yourself at the child's level. And I'm saying this to you as an example because that translates into obviously therapy and coaching, right? Equality between humans. Just because one human is small or doesn't know everything doesn't mean that you need to treat them from the upside down position. And so by doing both the experiential, feeling it in your bones, and then we add the theory to it to explain to people, what Adler's ideas were behind it. But there are some Adlerian parenting movements and organizations. One of them is called Positive Discipline, literally has the word positive discipline in it. And they do their trainings. I'm also positive discipline certified with them. Their trainings really encompass nothing but experiential, exercise after exercise, debrief. So it's all about question, discussion, experiencing, question, discussion, etc.
Yeah, positive discipline I'm so curious about that, but it might lead us away from, it might be relevant to coaching. We'll see if it comes back.
Yeah.
But what I first wanted to acknowledge is that for the longest time, I was working on my laptop and I was kind of looking down at people. Not that I wasn't looking down at people, but my gaze was kind of going up, and the angle that my camera was, you could see half of the ceiling. And, I think it makes a difference when we meet people at eye level, or whether we slightly look up to them, or, depending on how the camera is set. And it's these small things that often we don't really think about that, psychologists such as Alfred Adler were thinking deeply about.
Well, and actually we have another exercise, which is when we talk about power struggles with children, which of course I'm talking about the parenting world, but this always translates into the world of the adults, right? So when we have them experience a power struggle, we have the child having a power struggle, and we have the parent get down below the child's level. so that the child who's trying to exert power and feels powerless in that moment gets a sense of,
Yeah.
doesn't get overpowered by the child, by the parent, and then you don't increase the power struggle. And that's true also
Yeah.
of adults. So
Yeah, and I think that's one of the many things that we can learn from child-adult relationships to adult-to-adult relationships. But I feel let's take a couple of steps back.
yes.
Could you draw out the landscape of Adlerian psychology a little bit? I know him and Freud, they were friends and also colleagues. At some point, it seems like so many people split from Freud in some areas and kind of started their own schools of psychology. So could you give us a kind of an overview of like Alfred Adler, his psychology, how it came to be, and then maybe we can lead into some of the main principles.
Sure. So they were both born in or around Vienna in the 1870s. So Freud was, I think, 15 or 16 years older than Adler, and so there was that age difference, right, to start with. No, I'm sorry,
Mhm.
that's a lie. Hold on, let me see. I put my notes here. 1950. Yes, actually, it is true. So Freud, 1856, and then Adler in 1870. So about 15 years different, 14 years difference, and they both became doctors, and then they both became psychotherapists and psychoanalysts. At the time, that was the word, and they both were in the same Viennese cafes and having these intellectual debates and discussions. And so Adler, who was younger, joined the Viennese cafe and organization that Freud was a part of, and then became actually the director in 1902 of the Psychoanalytical Society of Vienna. I forget the exact name. And he did that from 1902 to 1911. And then they parted ways, and Adler left the organization and then created individual psychology, the individual psychology movement, which is the name of his psychology, which we need to talk about in a moment. Its importance, and had a few of the people that were in the analytical society follow him into his new movement. And the reason that they parted ways, that we can go really deep, and I am not a trained psychologist, I am not a scholar, so I don't actually want to go there because I wouldn't be of much use there. But the main thing, and I heard the podcast with was it Lawrence Bennett?
Lawrence Barrett, yeah, the Jungian
The
coach.
Jungian coach, and so he talked about this quite a bit and very eloquently. But what we talk about in the Adlerian circles is that Freud's view of things was that there's a lot of unconscious stuff that comes from our childhood, comes to us from when we're little, and we have all these unconscious things, and they're buried, and we are led in our adult lives by our pulsions that come out of this unconscious, right? By things that we're not aware of, we can't really repress, and we can't really change much about. And Adler decided what he believed was that the human being was in fact extremely creative, that it didn't have to be that complicated, and it wasn't that complicated, that there wasn't this humongous like unconscious beast somewhere, that we weren't different parts either, and that's where the word individual psychology comes from, that we are one whole, and that's one of the 5 assumptions, holism, one whole being, mind, body, soul, all of it together, all parts interacting with each other and influencing each other. And so individual psychology comes from the word individere, which in Latin means undivisible. So not divisible, right? So that's probably the opposite of what one might think when they hear about individual psychology. It has to do with the one human versus the society or the others or whatever. No, it means a whole human being. That you can't really split apart. You can't split into different parts. And so there's not this unconscious, this dark past, these things that the human can't know about, and mostly that it drives us, that it's kind of like encrypted in our DNA, like, and that there's nothing we can do about it. We have to suffer and we have to be the victims of it for the rest of our lives. No, he believed that we did have a past that did create who we are. That's another one of the 5 assumptions. It's called our lifestyle or our private logic. So how we make meaning of life. We do create that in our early childhood, but it is something that can be made overt, that we people who know a little bit about this stuff can, with very simple exercises, help other humans discover and see for themselves. They usually already know it. It's inside of them. I can give you some examples, but and we can make overt. And so now we make overt the narrative of our private logic and our lifestyle, which then means, and that's where coaching starts, which then means that now we can change that narrative if we don't like it, if we don't like what we find, if it's keeping us from being the full potential that we can be, if it's getting in the way, if it creates obstacles and challenges for ourselves, we can actually change those patterns by rewriting the story into a new story, and then starting acting as if, pretending, practicing, rewiring our brain. Basically, this is neuroscience, right? Rewiring our brains to become the new person we want to be in service of the things that we want, the goals that we have. So Adler straight from Freud on these very essential points. We are creative, we are resourceful, we are whole. The coaches say that, Adler said that. And that means what? That means that we can recreate ourselves, and we are not bound and held back by some dark, deep, unconscious stuff. And we're not taught, and when we need a little bit of help from a friend, so it could be a therapist if we are healing things from the past, or it can be from a coach if we're trying to reach, goals that we cannot reach on our own. When we come to get help by somebody, if this person is our equal, we're going back to the beginning, right? If we are standing eye to eye, we're sitting in the chair from each other. We don't have somebody lying down beneath us, and we actually have a conversation, right? In as far as I understand it, because I have not done one, but if you do a psychoanalysis, the real traditional way is that the psychoanalyst doesn't say anything at all, just asks maybe one question and then lets the person speak for a while. And in Adlerian work, and in whether it's coaching or therapy, we have a dialogue, and I'm just a catalyst to you. I'm just trying to help you see yourself, help you see what's holding you back, and helping you overcome obstacles that can be either healing or reaching goals.
So Adlerian psychologists, therapists, analysts, they have always met their clients, or attempted to meet their clients at eye level, always believed in their innate creativity, resourcefulness. That sounds very coaching. And I'm not surprised hearing that now, that you once referred to as Alfred Adler, as the grandfather, the first ever coach.
Right.
Possibly Aristotle, I think you mentioned. But
Right.
if that seems to make sense from that perspective. Is that the case, that the therapists also work in that manner of really meeting the client at eye level, believing in their resourcefulness?
Absolutely. Eye to eye, face to face, heart to heart. As in all therapy, of course, the Adlerian therapist is going to establish a relationship of trust in the beginning, but that trust, the purpose of the trust in the Adlerian therapy, in the Adlerian work, is to really establish the fact that we're equals, right? So you and I were talking about this, whether we should say you or du or sie, tu, vous, and in
Informal.
in Adlerian work, we're going to be informal. We're going to be human to human. I am no expert in anything except I know maybe a few things or two about human psychology, about how people are made up, why they are made up the way they are. And I can just help you. I can be the catalyst of helping you see yourself and finding out what's holding you back and helping you reach your goals. And I don't have any superpowers. I am not like superior to you in any way. There's only, by the way, one expert in the room. Again, no matter what the modality is, there's only one expert in the room, in yourself, and that is you. And there is, I don't have a crystal ball. I cannot read in your mind, and there's nothing and no training of mine and no experience of mine that's going to help me figure out who the heck you are and what makes you tick.
Yeah, and you mentioned goals a couple of times. From the little I know about Adlerian psychology, goals played a special role, and that might be a more dominant role than in other therapy approaches.
Yes. So here's an Adlerian quote. Adler said, "Trust only movement. Life doesn't happen at the level of words, just trust movement, watch the movement. So he believed that, and so that's kind of a very interesting thing to discuss about in coaching, because here we are talking in therapy for that matter too, right? We're here talking, we have our coaching sessions or our therapy sessions. Nothing happens during those sessions. Really, truly, nothing actually happens because there is no movement. The movements start happening once you and I close our computers. I walk out of this room and now I go back to life. I go back to my
Mhm.
life. I'm going to get choked up. I'm sorry, because I'm here in Germany taking care of my aging parents. So the life outside of this door is pretty rough right now.
Mm.
And
Yeah.
and that's where I show my true colors. And that's where whatever progress I decided I wanted to make, whatever goals I wanted to reach, I've discussed them with you. And you might have helped me understand why not, what stands in my way, how I'm getting in my own way, how I'm tripping myself. But the litmus test, as they say in English, is going to be, once I walk out the store, what do I do?
Yeah,
In
what actually
which
changes in my behavior? We might have a real shift in, some sort of paradigm that got challenged, or, we might have, uh, yeah, come to an insight that might change everything. So something clearly happened, but that the litmus test is only when our behavior changes and
exactly.
how we are outside.
So to go back to the goals, the therapy goals might be goals of healing. Somebody is coming to therapy. That's how, you coaches, that's how we make the difference between therapy and coaching. We say, well, in therapy, we work more in the past towards healing. We try to heal mental illness or imbalance, and so that's possibly trauma. I mean, and coaching, we really help people go from where they are today to where they want to go into the future, and help them. But in both cases, there's goals. They're just not the same exact goals. The
Mhm.
goals usually have one thing in common when we are in a helping profession, which is humans come to us because they want to get to a better place, typically, right? And so it's just that the
Yeah,
nature of
or
that.
away from a bad one.
Exactly. And so the nature of that might be different, depending on the profession you work in. But it's always goal directly. And yes, Adler had only one goal, and the goal was, I mean, this is going to sound, I actually didn't speak to him, so I don't know for a fact, but my understanding is that his goal was that humanity didn't have to suffer as much. Things could, so
Mm.
another Adlerian quote, things can always be different, right? So individual psychology is a very, very hopeful psychology, unlike Freud's, excuse me for two old Freudians, but because it's all about things can always be different. You don't have to be where you are right now. There is a way, there is a different way. It can be different. It's not up to me, it's up to you. I can't do it for you, but I can be your catalyst. I can be your supporter. I can be your encourager. I can help you get there, right?
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, and you mentioned some tools. It sounds like there's a lot offered in terms of how can we actually help people achieve that. And whether that's therapy or whether that's coaching, seems to be a lot about who the client is. If they're in a place that is, I mean, everybody is based on that philosophy, in a resourceful, creative, whole kind of bracket. But then some people really struggle to get out of a hole right now, and that might be more conducive to therapy. And a lot of people, they really want to move forward with something, and they're generally well able to deal with life's challenges, but they want to move forward. It sounds like there's a series of tools or
Mhm.
exercises, or things we can offer as part of methodology of coaching. Could you give us some examples of what they are and what they might do?
Yes. I'm trying to think which way I should approach this. So the number one, oh, another Adlerian assumption. We talked about five, right? So we've talked about holism, we've talked about private logic, we've talked about this logic of movement, which is called teleology,
Hmm.
right? Teleology
Hmm.
means movement towards gold. There's another one of the assumptions, which is it's encouragement based, it's strength based, right? That's another thing that makes it so hopeful too. So
Hmm.
people typically come to, again, to a helping professional because they are a little discouraged. So they're either discouraged because they really don't feel good mentally or,
Hmm.
health wise, or they just stuck and they can't get to something, and they want to become a bit better at something or better at themselves or reach some goals. So they are discouraged. So in other words, they have lost courage, and the word courage comes from the word cœur, which is heart. So they have lost heart in other words, they've lost belief that they can do it on their own themselves, right? So Adlerian psychology is all about encouraging people. And so the number one tool, excuse me, the number one tool of an Adlerian coach, I contend that it should be the number one job of any helping professional, in particular coaches, is to be an encourager, right? So what I tell my clients during the discovery session, the initial session, is I'm going to be your biggest fan. And so, by the way, I cannot really work with you if I can't be your fan, right? So there need to be good chemistry, and I need to really believe in you. But I am yet to meet somebody I don't believe in 18 years. Because of that slant, right? There's always good, there's always something in everyone, right? So my job as a catalyst is to help you, to support you, to encourage you, to give you courage again, right? That's why I'm the challenge coach. I help people find the courage again, that you can do this, right? And so the number one tool is encouragement. And if you don't mind, I'd love to say something about encouragement, because I hear so many coaches doing this, and I'm just going to be honest with you, it drives me crazy. It's doing what we in our parenting classes teach parents not to do with their kids, which is, it's called praise. Great job, you're awesome, you're fabulous, oh, you're the best on this, and you did fantastic, I'm giving you 5 stars, right? This is all praise, so what we call it junk food, if you will, and it's not news people can use. Do you know? So it's
Mm.
not information. So encouragement is, I see you, like I see you, Yannick, as you're such an amazing human being. I mean, for so long now already, even though you're still so young, you're researching your passions, you're curious about everything, you're trying to make the world a better place through the work that you do. You decided to host.
Keep going.
You decided to host this podcast, after so many years of this other wonderful host, on behalf of this amazing school, NMS Coaching. And so, somebody who can do these things can also do this other thing that you're trying to do, that you're struggling with right now. I believe you can, right? So it's encouragement is news you can use. So anyway, that's the first tool.
But based in what you know and based in concrete things, pulling out the resources, the strengths, what you can appreciate and acknowledge somebody for, rather than a relative or a relatively vague, I believe in you, you can do this.
Right. And
Good
so
job.
it's not artificial, right? It's based in fact. It's factual information, and it's not fake, and it's not rah-rah. It's not what some Europeans think it's the American rah-rah. That's not what we're talking about here. I had a train of thought that I just lost. It's okay. So that's the first tool, and it is just so important. And coaches, it's easy for coaches. I mean, they know their clients really well. They have a lot of information, right? And sometimes it's a little uncomfortable for people, because being on the receiving end of encouragement, if you haven't had that a lot in your life, can be slightly, wait a second, but if somebody is consistently doing it and is consistently offering it, it starts really seeping into your fibers. And in parenting, what we tell parents is you're planting the little seed of self-knowledge inside of your child. So the coach can plant this little seed of self-knowledge inside of the client, so that the client can start sprouting it himself, start seeing the plant emerge from within. Because here's another thing. We want to work ourselves out of the job. Now, I don't know that it's true of every coach or every therapist, for that matter. Certainly not of psychoanalyst. But me, an Adlerian coach, what Adler wanted is, he wanted people to be self-functioning. So he did something, by the way, I'll just throw a little anecdote in. He did something called the open forum counselings. So he was the first one, I believe, who did public therapy on the stage in front of everyone. And so he would bring in an individual, he would bring in a family. It was mostly family counseling, in front of a stage, in front of a public. And the public had very clear rules. You're not intervening, you're not participating, you're not interrupting and making noises. You're just being grateful for the gift that this family or this person is giving you. And the Adlerian counselor would help and counsel this family or this individual in front of everyone, so that the audience could learn at the same time. So it was like multiplying the effect. Like, this is not like what's the word I'm looking for? rocket science. This is not rocket science. This is just a human being struggling with regular human issues that we all have and we're all confronted with. And so we can all learn from watching somebody else, doing this. So anyway, that's a little side note. Where were we a second ago?
We were finishing up, I think, on the assumptions, and then
the encouragement.
we
You
were
were
at
asking me about
encouragement.
tools. Yes, about tools. So encouragement is definitely one of the foundational ones, I think. But it's not a technique, if you will. I mean, it's a technique in the sense it's a little different than different than praise. But
I think let me jump in there because I think it's important, right? Because I think we can learn it as a technique, but it's gonna be most valuable when it becomes part of our lens and our perspective of how we tune into people.
that's right.
Because I can train someone to recognize strength and encourage people to use more of that or recognize them. But I think there's something when it becomes a way of being, because you started really owning the lens, it became part of what you see, that it really unfolds all of its power.
Yeah, you don't see the world the same way when you have encouragement lenses, or when you've trained your brain with that bias, so to speak. Which, by the way, I'd love to, if you don't mind, make because we were talking about Adler as the grandfather of coaching potentially, right? And a lot of people claiming that. Adler not only, by the way, is known and somewhat researched as the grandfather of coaching, as one of the first coaches, but also as the grandfather of all modern psychotherapy. So all modern psychotherapy currents and also coaching schools, by the way, are very much seeped into his theory. Now, he was a very modest guy, a very humble guy. He couldn't care less about fame. And that's, I told you in the beginning, I would tell you two reasons why I really love Adler, why I fell head over heels in love with him in the beginning. It was the first time as a layperson. I had an MBA, I was doing international sales, I was a mom, it's like, right? But I was always interested in philosophy and psychology. And I studied a lot of them, not deeply, and all of them always. And one of your podcasters, one of the guests said, I think it might have been Lawrence Bennett, it's so obscure. You try to read the text and you don't understand anything. It's just like, it's so, somebody said, you need a PhD just to be able to read the text, or you need to really work yourself through the text. And that's not the case with Adlerian psychology. It is common sense. It is so easy. So you can get up in the morning. So I loved his humility and egolessness. And so he didn't care about, making a mark. He cared about changing the world, changing one person helping people one person at a time, and then trying to multiply and helping people more than one at a time. But then the second thing is, it's something that you can get up in the morning, you can put on as an outfit, and you can decide, okay, today I'm going to live my life as an Adlerian. It's easy and it's incredibly hard. It's easy because it is such common sense, which is the reason why nobody gives credit where credit is due, and why he's not known as the grandfather of all these things. And all of these various currents take from his ideas and have developed some of these ideas in very deep movements and schools, etc. But also, it's very hard because being an Adlerian means you decide that you're responsible for your choices, and that you are actually responsible for your life, and that you are in charge of everything you say, everything you do, and even everything you think, that you're in charge. And so when you have that inner locus of responsibility and you truly embrace it, there is no more excuses in life. There is no more excuses. So it's easy because it's like bare bones, easy to understand who we are, how we are, etc. Not that easy to live on a day-to-day basis. So the connections that I wanted to make from Adlerian psychology is, in this particular example, encouragement it's a strengths-based psychology. And so it seeps into authentic happiness. It seeps into positive psychology. It seeps into appreciative inquiry, right? All of these things are subs, don't know what the word is, and I don't want to insult anybody, but they come directly. He had kind of already talked about that and was living it and practicing it with his clients and with his patients. The other thing that we were talking about is you can rewrite the narrative. You can look at where your stories come from. That's
narrative
narrative
psychology,
therapy,
coaching therapy. Yeah, in a nutshell.
right?
And owning the responsibility of our choices. I mean, that's super existential.
Right.
And there's a lot of links to Eastern philosophies as well.
Exactly. Well, yeah, because the prerequisite of all of this stuff is, of course, you got to become aware first, right? And awareness comes from
Hmm.
where? From mindfulness practice. And so, I'm not saying that Adler was himself a mindfulness practitioner or meditator. I actually don't know anything about that. But now that I'm talking about this, I'm going to go check it out because I'm curious.
Yeah.
But I know that a lot of Adlerian's practitioners today are definitely themselves mindfulness practitioners, meditators, etc. Because how are you going to be able to figure yourself out and be at choice every moment of every day if you're not first aware of what you're doing and self-conscious, self-aware, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. And you had mentioned, sorry, Stemo.
Yeah, I was going to say you wanted tools, so I wanted to give you the other tool, and that's where we're kind of treading in a little bit dangerous territory. So my workshop on Adlerian coaching is called. There's very few Adlerian coaches. I need to tell you that. I told you there's no school. Linda Page, whom I mentioned before, who did a podcast in 2018 with you guys on Adlerian psychology and Adlerian coaching, is the founder of the Adler Graduate School in Toronto, right? And there's a few
Mhm.
Adler schools. They're really giving masters and masters, maybe PhDs in Adlerian counseling. So they're therapy schools. The Adler School in Toronto, which gives a master's in Adlerian psychology, has a coaching school inside of it. It's called the
Mhm.
Adler School. And when you go to the Adler coaching school, which I also did, because once I did CTI and then I found out that there was an Adlerian school of coaching called Adler, I'm like, are you kidding? I'm going. So
I'm in.
I went to the Adler School of Coaching. I did the training. Actually, even was on the faculty for a bit, and that was just as COVID happened, so that went down the tubes. But it's in fact simply just a coaching school, and simply I don't mean to be negative, right? I mean it is just coaching as you would get at CTI, Coach U, in other schools. In the very beginning, because they're housed under Adler, they say, here's why we're here. We're Adler School of Coaching because Adler is a grandfather of coaching, right? And every once in a while they mention a little bit of it, but really barely at all. So there's no
Right.
Adler coaching certification, though that's a good idea that might explore at some point. Um, and so there's very few Adlerian coaches, and Adlerian coaches that I know are people that were Adlerian therapists and that are Adlerian therapists
Yeah.
and psychologists who have then one day decided to switch to coaching. So there's
Yeah.
one dear friend and colleague. His name is Jay Calker. He just came out with a book on leadership. He was a leadership coach his entire career, but he's a trained Adlerian psychologist at first. There's another one who you might have heard of, Patrick Williams, and you might love having him,
Yeah.
both of them actually on your podcast at some point. Pat Williams is an MCC, and he's one of the, how there's like a few coaches that they're like the founders of coaching. They're all at the beginning of coaching, like 30 years ago. So Pat Williams is one of them. He was with Thomas Leonard. He was, one of the starters of the
Mhm.
ICF, etc. He's written multiple books. He had a school of coaching for many years. He's still active. Um, and he's actually going to be the keynote speaker at the next North American Society of Adlerian Psychology conference in May or in
Mm.
June in Orlando, Florida. And so, but there's few of them, right? And so I decided one day to call myself an Adlerian coach because I'm an Adlerian and I'm a coach, so I'm an Adlerian coach. But it really doesn't mean anything to anyone, and I actually really don't put it anywhere because nobody would know what the heck it means, and it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter.
Well, yeah.
What it does,
That
though,
that's
go ahead.
No, no, just that's what I'm getting, right? That there isn't any Adlerian coach out there, but at the same time, every coach out there is sort of Adlerian. It's just that they're not wearing the brand, and the brand Adler doesn't really. It's not as sexy as a Whitmore, perhaps, or a performance coaching. Like people don't really have the framework for that anymore.
Exactly.
So
Exactly.
I get what you're saying.
And what it does, what I mean when I say it, and I say it today proudly and happily, is that it informs. Like I've heard so many of your other podcasts, all of the people that have been on it, whatever their story is, their past, their psychology, their background, their framework informs how they work with their clients. And
Mhm.
then the positive psychology podcast we're talking about, and you were one of the ones I listened to when you were interviewed. Positive
Mhm.
psychology is all about informing how we do the work, and I think it was you, or was it another one? I forget who said, I think it was you. First, I put positive psychology aside. I get into the client's Like I try to get into their world. I try to get them. I hear their story. I hear what they have to say. And once I'm done listening, then maybe I bring back the psychology, the positive psychology, I put it on top of that and see how can I use this to then help my client, right? So that's what I do with Adlerian with my Adlerian framework.
Yeah.
Is it helps me. So one of the things it helps me is, don't tell my clients, I don't really care what you say. I'm going to watch what you do, right? And so that's not true exactly. Of course, I care about what we talk about
Yeah, of
during our
course.
sessions, and of course, what we talk about in our sessions is quintessential. But what I'm really going to be curious about is how you behave throughout the coaching, and how what you do in between the sessions, and how you deal with the tasks that you've taken on and the accountability part of things, right? And how you decide for yourself that you're actually making this worth your while, that you're actually deciding to change, and that you're actually deciding to try to reach those goals that you've set up for yourself in the beginning. The proof,
Yeah, so really paying attention to movement.
Right. And the Americans have this really funny expression, the proof is in the pudding, right? And so I'm watching the pudding. Is the pudding changing? Right.
Yeah.
So that's one of the ways that I'm an Adlerian coach. And but another way.
Can I just jump in there as well? Just because it's such a helpful distinction that we can use Adlerian or positive psychology or any other kind of theoretical framework to kind of pull out after we've connected and see what's in there. And then there's also the listening from that perspective. And I find that listening from what I've gathered, right, through an Adlerian lens, is listening to someone through a coaching lens. All the principles that we're being taught, all the assumptions that we're being taught about coaching, they seem to be very alive in Adlerian psychology, or very much coming from it, the way that you put it out there. So I think there's something in there when we're connecting with someone, when we're listening. I think our theoretical lens is already active. Right. And for some coaches, I think it becomes active as soon as they kind of lean back and they look what's in their box and what could we do now. And this is when the tools and interventions, they might be helpful. But exactly. I think without having the lens first to listen to it, I think it creates a very different atmosphere.
And that's the other thing that I was going to tell you about the tools question. And it's one of the assumptions we talked about, which is this private logic bit. And that's really, really important in Adlerian psychology. And that really informs my Adlerian work, which is, I know. So you must have heard the quote by Anais Nin, we don't see the world as it is, we see the world as we are, right?
Yes.
And so that's one of the 5 assumptions is this subjective view of the world, right? And so what you learn when you learn Adlerian psychology and you go to Adlerian psychology school is you learn that we come into this world fairly unfinished, right? And we come with our own DNA and our own temperament. That's our internal makeup that we come with, and then we come onto this stage of the world in a framework or a theater stage, if you will, where there might be other siblings. So there's a birth order component. There's parenting styles. Your parents, how many kids have they had? Where are they in their lives? How old are they, etc. And a family environment. So values. Logistical environment, etc. And with the internal and the external environment, the creative human with a very creative brain starts setting out in the world trying to make sense of it. Who am I? Mm-hmm. Who are the others? How do I fit in? How do I function? Right? And starts creating conclusions for themselves, their own private logic conclusions that then defines their lifestyle, how they're going to go through the rest of their life, right? Based on these conclusions that they have drawn in early childhood. And what happens is we then go out in the world, we have drawn a conclusion. I'm going to give you an example. Okay, never mind. It's an extreme one, but dad comes home and every time he comes home drunk, I better stay out of the way because then it's trouble, right? So I've learned that, when drunk people walk in the room, I need to go stay out of the way. So that's kind of like, and then I go out into the world and I look for proof of my assumption, of my conclusion. And we all have between 8 and 12 early recollections, early memories that are the condensation of those 4 or 5 big life assumptions that we have created when we were little. So that's the narrative, right? 4 or 5 big life themes together create our lifestyle, our private logic. And there is the key to them, which is those 8 to 12 early recollections that we have. So here I am as a coach. I'm not a therapist, remember. I'm a coach, and then I have this client, and I work with this client for like 6 months or whatever. And they came to me with a problem, and they say, I can't do that. And so I take out all my coaching tools. We do the Wheel of Life, we do the balance coaching, we do, the VS Strength Survey, we do a bunch of tools. We do homework, they have the accountability, and we go back to square one over and over and over again. I don't usually wait that long. It's pretty clear that there is something in their lifestyle that's so one of their conclusions that's just getting in the way of them. So I'll give you a concrete example. Would you like one?
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. That'd be great.
So this one client that comes to me and says, I have analysis paralysis. I'm a middle manager in this company, and I have responsibilities, and I need to move fast. And every single time I need to send an email, it takes me 3 days to hit send. I die, and I go through anxiety and panic attacks you would not believe, right? And so we work on it. We practice. Nothing works. And so eventually I say, well, okay, this is an Adlerian moment. Do you have an early recollection that you want to share with me? Do you have a memory that's coming up as we're talking about this? And it's, 99.9% of the time it comes out like that. Like it's incredible. And so the story that this person tells me is that one day they were in the supermarket when they were 5 years old with their mom, I think, and stole an apple off the apple cart and started eating it. And then somebody from the store, somebody with responsibility, an adult, came over and says, I saw you stole this apple. And then the mom comes running, and that's it. That's the end. And the conclusion that the person drew in that moment is, I better never get caught again. I better never get caught again sending an email that doesn't have the right information, that could cause trouble later on, that could, et cetera, et cetera. So now the person knows that one of the 4 or 5 big life themes that they have is, I better not get caught, right? And they're super careful because of that. They have analysis paralysis. So now coaching begins. So now now that you know, how do you choose to rewrite the story? Right? And this,
You can reauthor it now.
well, first of all, let's argue with this, right? You were 5 years old. You didn't know any better. You might not even have known what stealing meant, right? What could you have done different? What could you have concluded differently in this case? Well, when I get caught taking an apple, I need to apologize and put it back, or something like that. It could have been a different conclusion. But so now they get to rewrite the narrative and then start practicing it, because now you got to actually rewire your brain with that new story, right? And that
well, that's the thing, right? Intellectually, the work is quite quick in, I know I don't have to feel like that, but then emotionally I'm still affected. And I think that happens a lot for coaches when they do that kind of work with client. The client arrives at, I don't need to feel like that, but I still do. And you say that the solution to that is in actually going out and doing the doing, kind of desensitizing yourself with this new story.
Exactly. And so one thing I want to add, I know we're getting close to the end of times here. But I just want to add that I would not recommend any coach does the exercises I just explained to you, which I don't do very often, but I do them when it makes sense, because we've tried everything else. Nothing has worked visibly. By the way, I don't know if you've had that experience with your clients, but quite often a client comes to you with a story and an issue that they want to discuss in coaching. And they say, without you saying anything at all, they say, and it reminds me of, and boom, there comes the memory that's attached to it, right? It happens quite a lot. But a word of caution to all coaches out there, do not do this work without being trained in it, right? Like everything else. I mean, do not do coaching without being trained and certified in coaching. That's my personal opinion. And even though you could, and certainly do not do Adlerian work without being, trained in it very deeply. Because like Lawrence Bennett said last week or 2 weeks ago in the podcast, you don't want to go in places where you can create harm, right? And so I think that what's really important for a coach to know is what do I know, what am I good at, and what are my limits, where should I not tread over. So I really get audiences of coaches riled up when I talk about this what we just talked about, early recollection, lifestyle, private logic.
I bet you do.
But and it is definitely not coaching, because this is an exercise. It's directive. I'm telling them what to do. The analysis of the memory, though, that's not coming from me. we're putting our brains together, we're looking at this thing on the table. It's like, okay, what do we see? Let's just look. And if the client says that I see this and I don't see it, they're the expert, right? They know what the
Yeah.
link is. But this
And I think
is
that's the difference between being directive and directional. Amy van Derzen, who I spoke to about this recently, laid that out beautifully, right? That we can actually point to an exit, or we can ask a question that is informed by what we know theoretically,
Mhm.
right? Not just a hunch that there might be something there, because the question is quite bold, right? Client tells you about this, that, or the other, and you essentially ask, tell me about your earliest childhood memory. That just oozes therapy. But if the client is resourceful and whole and creative, and they're up for a conversation that goes into some depth, and they can hold themselves, and they have a support network, and they're able to engage with their memories both intellectually and
Well,
emotionally, then then the difference between coaching and therapy is not in the intervention or the exercise, but the difference is in who's sitting in front of me and how resourced are they.
exactly. And one thing that's really important is, again, I don't do it all the time. And sometimes what might happen, and sometimes has happened, is you now open the door to
Mm.
something dark, to something that does not belong in coaching, and not great. But hey, we just discovered something that maybe had not
Oh,
been
well,
out there
that's
before.
that's great.
And now,
It's not.
well, you know what I mean? I was just playing on words, but it's not
Yeah,
great
it's
that we
not. It's not
discovered.
uncomfortable.
Um,
It's not comfortable.
but now, okay, so now what do you want to do with that? Now, this is
Mhm.
not something I can help you with, but you want to do something about it, right? And so, but now we've uncovered what's getting in the way. We might have discovered it
Yeah.
in coaching. And again, this is not the thing is this is not therapy, because I'm not healing the past. I'm just like looking for information. It's like, oh, um, you know, uh, can I give you one other quick example, or do we not? We don't have time anymore, do we?
Yeah. No, we've got some time. We only
Okay.
started at 10 past.
Okay. So another example is this person with a very client-facing job. Um, this got diagnosed with a terminal illness, and the treatment for this illness is going to be visible, right? And this person
Mm.
is just dying of the fact that they do not want to be seen, do not want this to be known, and so. But this is going to make their
Mm.
life very difficult, because it's a job, it's
Yeah.
their job, it's their life, it's client facing, and they don't want people to see, and that people are going to see. So how do you deal with this conundrum? And so it
Mm.
was clear, after working around it, that there was something from childhood. And the story was, I was 6 years old. I was in elementary school, and I peed my pants in front of the teacher, in front of the entire class. And the conclusion was, it's a little more complex than that, the exercise, but it still doesn't take very, very long. It takes about a session each time for one memory. Um, the the conclusion that they drew is, therefore I must hide. I must not be seen,
Mm.
right? And so now, how do we? This was a life-threatening illness, right? This was a very serious issue, and based on this, and so by developing the ability of this client to help her, and you understand this is not therapeutic material. I mean, it could be, but it doesn't have to be therapeutic material. It's like, can you love this child? Like, what if you were the teacher? The teacher reacted very poorly, right? And that's why the child decided, I must hide. I might never get
Mhm.
caught again, It was a similar situation. And said, what if the teacher had said something differently? What if, your parent had come to the rescue? What if you were the adult?
Mm.
How would you have treated this child? How would you have wanted to be treated, right? Can you just love this child, love and heal that little wound that is having such a huge impact in your life today as a 50-year-old person, in the professional world? So that's
Sure.
just another example. And so I'm trying to help, people, coaches whom I present this to really, and that's what Adler would have wanted. Who cares what we're called? Who cares what matters is that we know what we know, that we know our limits, that we do no harm, and that we truly, and that is, again, coaching. I believe in you. I know, because I'm an Adlerian, I know you have the capacity to get where you want to get over the obstacles that you have to get through the stuff that's keeping you stuck. And you came to me so I can help you a little bit with like untethering yourself from these things. I can help you find a little clarity, but I believe in you. I know you can. Inherently, like I really truly believe that creative is also in a whole. And so it's contagious. Like,
Yeah, exactly. And I always marvel in the power of who we are being met with. If we meet someone and we're spending time with someone who just so unequivocally believes in our capacity and potential, it's so easy for that to be contagious. And I think in that contagion, we have a lot of power, you know, but at the same time, it's an inspirational power. It's not an oppressive power.
so imagine in parenting.
Uh-huh. Yeah, well, there the power dynamics are a lot more interesting, right? Because it's not a relationship that just severs like a coaching relationship could potentially.
Mhm.
But wow.
But if you
Yeah, so really,
if
hmm?
you
Yeah, go
believe
ahead.
if you believe in your 2-year-old, 4-year-old, 6 years ability to make choices, that they have a
Oh yeah.
choice, that they can decide for
Yeah.
themselves, that whatever choices they have is going to have consequences, and they don't have to be consequences that I institute. There are going to be consequences from, you don't wear your shoes out in the snow, your feet are going to get cold. You don't eat breakfast, you're going to get hungry. You decide to hit your friend over the head, your friend is not going to be happy and might hit you back, right? If as a parent we can, and as a coach, we can stand back and allow our children or our clients to, with this inherent belief in them and their capacity,
Mhm.
right? And in their wholeness, then we really allow the potential to come out.
Yeah, but without trying to control the outcome, but just being there as that fellow traveler with some eyes that you don't have.
I love the metaphor of the coach being the, in a boxing ring. So you got your child
Mhm.
boxing with life in the boxing ring, or you got your client boxing with life and their demons or whatever in the boxing ring, and you're the coach and you're not inside the ring with the client, with the child. You are not there trying to get in the way, trying to, change the movements or whatever. You're on the outside and you're like, yeah, you can do this. I believe in you. And like, if you just change your posture just there, just a little bit, see what happens, right? And just like,
Yeah, and you have these moments in between the rounds where you can actually have a chat.
mhm,
And what kind of coach are
like
you?
that.
What did you notice about the other person's posture when you go for
Mhm,
the right hook? It's a very different question to, hey, when this person does this, you need to do that.
mhm.
Oh, I love the coaching metaphor. Also, like it really sounds like it's deeply grounded in how our childhood forms us, how our childhood experiences form us, and not being afraid to go there. If you have the right kind of training and the right tools to work with it, but really, essentially, an approach that helps people move forward and really has a forward orientation and not just theoretical, but really in creating movement and
Exactly.
really quite hands-on from the sounds of it.
Another thing that is lies in my heart that I really want to share is, and again, I'm rebounding on because it's the last podcast I heard with Lawrence Bennett, the whole idea of the shadow thing, you know. And when I was listening to him describing what he called the shadow, he called about like deep dark emotions, like guilt, shame, whatever other dark emotions. And he was kind of saying, "Don't go there." Like as a coach, don't go there. I'm like, what are you talking about? You and I are humans. We have emotions. Some of them are pretty, and some of them are difficult. And that doesn't like you can't go there as a coach. That's crazy to me. And so again, if you hold somebody creative resourceful in a hole, which we coaches should be doing, and certainly Lyrians do, it's like you can hold you. This is normal human condition. You're gonna have some
Mm,
good emotions and some tough emotions. You're gonna have some good days and bad days. You're gonna have some stuff that's really, really hard and really, really painful. And I'm not afraid to go there as a coach because what else is there? Just because we
mhm,
are in coaching doesn't mean you left your humanity at the door, right?
mhm.
You still come
Yeah.
in with all your human baggage, and it's good, bad, and ugly, and it needs to be addressed sometimes if there's some of those things that are keeping you from moving forward. So
Mhm,
so that fear of the humanity, the emotions are just like, which a lot of new coaches in particular, and it's told in coach training, like we don't do emotions, we don't do the past, we don't do emotions, we just look towards the future. and we believe in good and positive and strong things, right? It's not the truth, though. That's not reality.
Yeah, well, what's the threshold, right? Everybody deals in emotions, but like usually in coaching, we're being taught that there's a threshold beyond which the strength of emotions is no longer appropriate here in the room. And I think it always comes back to the question: am I, as a coach, willing and able to hold this space or continue to hold this space?
Yeah.
And as you beautifully illustrated earlier, right, we can open up a door with a lot of darkness behind it. And I think that would be a really helpful outcome for a client to understand that there's a door with a lot of darkness and discomfort and fear and shame or whatever emotions might there be that a coach feels. That's not really coaching, and it doesn't matter what you call it. I mean, if
Right.
there's a space where you feel, ooh, I think I'm outside of my competency zone, I don't really know what to do with it, or this doesn't feel like coaching to me anymore, then that's when we, have that conversation that perhaps it's probably going to be better for the client to work with somebody else
Right.
who's specifically trained in the door that we just opened.
Right.
It's good that you found the door, but not every coach needs to be the person walking through that.
Right.
And I think it's good to not be afraid to point towards it.
Exactly. Exactly.
Mm. Wonderful. Pascale, is there something else that maybe you still wanted to add? Something around Adlerian psychology or coaching that you, some misconception or some helpful advice or suggestion, an invitation perhaps for our audience to engage with?
Well, I had made some notes about the things that I really wanted to have said, and we did talk about all of them. So I guess I just really want to come back to I have a really big, I'm going for my MCC right now. I'm not getting my MCC because it's incredibly hard. I've been doing this 18 years. I think I'm a pretty good coach, and yet I still fail, daily. And when I have people that say, "Oh, I just got certified as a coach. I just went through a 3-day program," or people that just say, "I'm a coach," and they have no coach training or certification, that drives me crazy. And I think really the coaching profession, and I know that Animas, and I forget the name of your founder, but
Nick?
Nick is really working towards, and a lot of people are towards really trying to get the coaching profession to be as licensed and as regulated as psychology and therapy are. And as much as I know I'm going to hate it when the day happens,
I was about to say, don't ask for too much regulation. It can also be a gatekeeping exercise that keeps really good people out of the profession, which happens to a lot of therapy, right? I think that's why we have a lot of coaches, and partly that's why we have you in the coaching space. Because if it was earlier and maybe life circumstances would have been different,
that's true.
you probably would have done Adlerian psychotherapy. You might have still ended up in the coaching space, but like,
Yes.
yeah, I like to ask the question around regulation, and I totally hear you, and I think you have extremely good points. But I also
So
do
within
think we need to
limits,
be a
right?
bit careful.
I hate
Yeah.
admin, I hate paperwork, but I do believe that a little more licensing or a little more regulation around the fact that you cannot call yourself a coach if you're not, trained or certified, that would be a really good thing for the profession, because all the things that we talked about today, even though Adlerian psychology is common sense psychology, still a lot of people don't know these things and they don't understand them. And similarly, I was just thinking as we were talking a moment ago, I also think that it'd be fantastic in each coach training that there would be like a psychology one-on-one course, so that the coach does know when they're out of their league. Like, when do you know when somebody's dysregulated and outside of their window of tolerance? How do you know that? Well, there's science, there's ways of measuring that. How do you know when somebody's really depressed and not just, in French we say, je suis déprimé, or je suis dépressif, j'ai de la dépression. And those are two slightly, in one case, I'm just like sad and having a bad day. The other case, I'm actually like clinically depressed, right? Wouldn't it be good for coaches to have a little bit of extra training in whatever coaching school they go to, that they would know what those limits are? And they'd be so much, we'd spend so much less time arguing about these things. And what a waste, I think.
Yeah, I think we would spend a lot of time trying to agree on what coaching is and which kind of trainings should be certified and which shouldn't be. And having that the job of the ICF alone or ACE, MCC, one of the professional bodies, is problematic because where do they get the authority from to decide what coaching is, right?
Mm. It's a complicated topic for sure.
It's a whole nother hour of conversation, I reckon. And I hope maybe someday we'll have it. And I hope we might spark something, right? Because that's also the point of these podcasts is that people are listening to this. And I hope we got you thinking about some of these assumptions, some of these principles, some of these tools, and how Adlerian psychology might be something that people out there might want to explore. Um, Pascal, where on that note, right, where would you send people who want to go further in understanding Adler psychology or his principles in coaching? And also, where can people find more about you?
Okay, so it's probably the same answer. So if people contact me, so I'm www.thechallengecoach.com. Very easy. On LinkedIn, on all social media, people can find me. My name is Pascale Brady, and I'm happy to answer any questions anybody asks and has and point them to wherever they need to go. Oh, something we didn't talk about. Oh my God, I did forget something. But the other two areas where people from all walks of life can really come fairly easily and get initiation and then as deep a training as they want as time goes is the North American Society of Adlerian Psychology. It's called NASAP, NASAP. And then the other one is the Adlerian Summer School, which is an international summer school, which lasts for 2 weeks every summer. And so you and I could meet there this summer because it's in Germany, and I'm going to be there.
Mm-mm.
And it's a week long, and you can take 1 week, the second week, or both weeks of intense Adlerian, therapy training, Adlerian theory training. So that those are two places where people can really, from anywhere, no matter what their background, can come and learn about Adlerian theory. There's of course the Adler School of Coaching, but as I said, it's mostly coach training with a little bit of an Adlerian introduction. And then if people just want to know more, they can find me. Can I say, oh, we're so past the hour. You tell me, can I say one more thing?
Look, absolutely. You can say three more things if you want.
Okay, great. So one of the assumptions that I completely forgot about, and it is absolutely essential, is that, trust only movement, just
Mhm.
watch the actions. What are you watching, right? And so what is the goal of the human? So that's another Adlerian assumption. There is two essential human goals, according to Adler. The first one is to overcome a felt sense of inferiority. So he was the first one.
Mm.
He's the one who coined the word inferiority complex. That came originally from the fact that he was a very sick child, that he had multiple deaths in his family, that he almost died multiple times. That's why he became a doctor and then a therapist. But if you look at the human being, we are the only species that if we don't have somebody taking care of us when we're born, we're out of here, right? We're no longer.
Mm.
And so our entire thriving through our entire life is to overcome that felt sense of inferiority. So it starts as a human mammal and then it keeps going throughout life. And then we can
Mm.
and then what is this thriving for superiority? It can either be superiority of becoming a better self, so that's where self-actualization
Mhm.
/ coaching comes into play, or it could be superiority over others, and that's where mental illness comes into play. That's when
Mm.
you're a perfectionist, or you're trying to beat others constantly. So you can either be on the ladder and trying to always go towards perfection, or overcome others, or you can be on the road of life towards your goal and striving to reach your goal. What's the second goal? Having a sense of belonging. And so in German, the Adlerian word for it is Gemeinschaftsgefühl. So
Mm.
Gemeinschaft, community, Gefühl, feeling of a community. So all humans, what they really want is they want a sense of belonging to the community. And they get the sense of belonging through what is called social interest. So that's all included in Gemeinschaftsgefühl, but in English we have to have multiple words. So we are trying to belong by contributing to the group in a positive way. So that's where all the social
Mm.
web comes into place. And so when I watch the clients' movement, in what direction? Well, they usually clients very often are trying to reach for perfection, And that is neurosis in and of itself. And so we're trying to get people back on the road of action, of movement towards a goal, a useful goal, where they can self-actualize and really make a difference in their own world, in their own circles. And that's when you get this Gemeinschaftsgefühl, this sense of belonging. I had to say this. This is so important in the theory, and I forgot to say it so far. So
No, this is brilliant because that makes a whole lot of sense. And again, so many links to other approaches and theoretical lenses, right? That we can only really be complete as part of a group. And whether how big or small that group is doesn't really matter. No, Adler did a lot of work in family psychology from the sounds of it. Really interesting to see the significance of the birth order, what kind of story that gives us. But that we see ourselves as part of a group, whether that's at work or at home in the family or in our social circles or in society. A lot of my work goes back to that theme of belonging.
do you know what the first act of social interest is of an infant who comes home to his family after the birth? Trying to figure out what is night and day so that he or she can sleep at night and let others sleep at night and then be awake during the day. So that is the first act of social interest as a human, is trying to figure out when I'm supposed to sleep and when I'm supposed to be awake. Isn't that funny?
Yeah, yeah. Wow, when I'm supposed to work here, where other people are not working. Wonderful. Hey, Pascale, thank you so much for your time and for your insights into this fascinating approach and how at the foundation it sits to how we understand coaching, or how most people understand coaching. It was just fascinating, and particularly great to hear how humble of a man Adler was in how he's engaged with his work and how he's opened it up. So thank you for opening it up to us.
My pleasure.
Really appreciate it. And maybe we can have that other conversation some other time.
I would love that. You can't even believe it. But thank you, Yannick. It was an honor to meet you. It was an honor to be here and to share some of these ideas. And we've just opened up a little corner, of course. But I hope it gave your audience, new perspectives, new openings, new curiosity, hopefully, into digging deeper in some of these things.
Well, you might find out soon.
That'd be great.
Okay, Pascale, thank you very much. Speak soon, yeah?
You're welcome. Thank you, Yannick. Take care. Bye-bye.
To watch these episodes on video, make sure you also check out youtube.com/animascoaching. See you back here soon.